Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Richard Moglen. Welcome to this week's Stock Market Outlook video sponsored by MarketSmith. And this week we rallied strongly on all indexes, and the Nasdaq is now back up against its 50-day moving average. It hasn't yet broken through that key moving average, but it is a start. And going over to the S&P 500, this is right near all-time highs, which is actually why IBD has switched back to a confirmed uptrend, given that this and the Russell are doing so well. So that's a quick run through of the indexes. The S&P 500 looks much stronger than the Nasdaq, but still this index has rallied strongly. And even though there were some kind of pretty volatile days and some gap downs last week, overall we're back up against that key moving average. And I really would like to see us push through that on volume and challenge these all-time highs relatively soon. So diving in, let's go over to well, actually, let's start with some sentiment, because I thought it was interesting that last week, basically, we were still pretty bullish. We were at 47.9% bullish on this past Friday, even though we were correcting on the Nasdaq at that point. And then we had that really interesting Monday. If we go to the Qs, we had a slight gap down and then a very, very poor close here, basically almost challenging the lows of the previous week. So that was very interesting, and I actually put out a kind of special sentiment survey just for that day because of that special occasion. And we dropped from, let's see, 47.9% bullish all the way down to 38.2% bullish, which is a significant drop. And that kind of indicated to me that maybe we were actually going to rally after that day, and turns out we did. So I thought that was interesting. And going through the QQQ on a daily time frame after this move up, we had a gap and go pretty much. Then we had a pretty similar day to this Monday. We had a strong gap up, but then a pretty poor close, gapped up again. So we had kind of two gap ups after poor closing ranges, which is a sign of strength. And on this past day, we did gap down, but compared to the other days, we actually finished strongly. And many growth stocks were acting very, very well, even though the Nasdaq was at times down over 1%. A lot of growth names were up 3, 4, even 5%. So growth stocks and the leaders in general were acting very well on this Friday. And going over to weekly charts, let's take a look there. You can see that this is, if you actually go to a weekly chart, this was an inside week with a strong closing range. Overall, we were up 2.2% on the QQQ with a week close range of 78.4% and a daily closing range on Friday of 59.5%. And the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher. We are in a stage 2 uptrend. Looking at the SPY, this is right near all-time highs. Overall, we were up 2.72% with a nice week close range of 88.8%, daily closing range on Friday of 95%, and the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend and also above a rising 10-week. Moving on to the IWM, it also was very strong, overall up 7.29% with a week close range of 96.6%, daily closing range on Friday of 79.9%, and overall the clear expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend. Next up, let's take a look at the FFTY. It was also kind of inside this week, so similar to the Nasdaq, but it's actually a little bit stronger because it is above that rising 10-week, while the QQQ is still below that key moving average. So I do want to see it kind of retake that hopefully next week. And going back to the FFTY, the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher. Overall, we're up 8.02% with a week close range of 95.8%, a daily close range on Friday of 98%, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend. Moving on to SMH, the semiconductors, you can see it wasn't quite as strong as the QQQ and actually undercut this low a little bit. And you can see that compared to the QQQ, this kind of close here is lower within the range than this one right here. So to me, that kind of gives me a sense that this isn't quite as strong as the other stocks in the QQQ. So overall, good week overall, 0.92%. The expectation is sideways or higher, but once again, not quite as strong as the other indexes. Looking at Ethereum, it had a nice 2-2 reversal here on the week, and overall was up 13.37% with a week close range of 41.9%, daily close range of 43.8%. The expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, even though it doesn't have the greatest closing range. It does have a nice close above this high. Moving on, we've got GBTC, which also had a nice 2-2 reversal and a nice kind of wick setup on the week. And overall on the week, it was up 14.16% with a weekly close range of 71.8%, daily close range of 27.5% on Friday, and the expectation from this bar is sideways or higher, and we are in a nice stage 2 uptrend. And lastly, we've got the VIX, which dropped significantly this week down to 20, so that's a good sign. And overall, it has been a little bit choppy here, especially given all the gap downs and quick moves into the close. But overall, we are seeing a little bit of a drop in volatility. So that is a quick run through of the indexes, and now moving on to the stocks that I've been starting. And overall, last week, it was very hard to manage risk. And what I mean by that is there wasn't any kind of tight action that much, and weren't really too many good opportunities to get in until this Friday. And basically, if you tried something here, you got stopped out this day. If you wanted to challenge something on the gap up, you couldn't really manage risk because the low of the previous day was probably 5-10% below on a lot of the growth stocks, and similar on these days and these days. So it was very tough until this Friday, and that's really when I started all these 4 positions. So Bumble, I did start on Friday morning after a nice upside reversal action and quick move up back through the kind of opening range here. And overall, I'm up about 3%, so not the biggest profit cushion, but hopefully it challenges kind of this point here, which did get knocked down off on this Thursday. And eventually, I want to see it move up towards the IPO base, which is at 85. If we actually go to this day, 84.8 is that pivot. So still needs a little bit of time, could form out this IPO base a little bit more. I do want to see kind of tighter action here as it moves up the right side here. Next up, we've got Etsy, which I bought as it moved down and then back through the 50-day moving average. So I was able to manage my risk versus that key moving average, as well as the low of the day. Added a few times as it continued to really outperform on this day. And overall, it looks pretty good. Not the greatest overall basing pattern, but very strong earnings and sales. And we'll see if I can kind of add through this pivot. Next up, we've got Snap, which I also bought off the 50-day moving average. And it finished really strongly. If you go to a 5-minute chart, look at this run towards the end of the day. I know this last 5-minute candle is pretty scary, but overall in the last just hour or so, it was up 5%. So very strong action. And I like how it retook all those key moving averages. And I love the kind of bullish days right here and right here. So hopefully this can finally work and challenge these all-time highs. And lastly, we've got Twitter, which I also started. It didn't finish quite as strongly as the other stocks here, but overall I bought it against the 21 EMA, pretty much right at that level. And it is still not quite moving, but I do want to see it kind of move through this high. And that would be kind of the point where I look to add to this position. And all of these are kind of starter positions. Etsy is my largest at this point, but I'm still not completely invested. I'm still kind of pacing myself, practicing progressive exposure. And if these continue to work well and increase in profits, I'll look to add to these or I'll look for new opportunities. And moving on, I'm not really going to go through the charts of these previous market leaders simply because not all of them are leading anymore. A lot of them are pretty broken down. Some of them will continue to lead and act well, but until a kind of new group of leaders emerges and kind of confirms through price trends, I'll skip that segment for now. But moving on to my previous RS list and sorting by that weekly change, we had a bunch of them that acted well. DKNG and Airbnb acted very well, breaking out through this pivot, and DKNG continues to really outperform as it really showed great RS throughout this pullback. Anyway, those two charts are the strongest. GM also broke out of this consolidation, which looks pretty good. Snapchat, we covered already. Uber moved up off the key moving averages. Sono continues to trend after bouncing off the 21 EMA. InMode is acting well. Nice inside day on this past Friday. DT moved up well from this kind of prior base high and is back above all those key moving averages. Nice action on this Friday, even though it was a down day. It recovered well off the lows. SSTK bounced off this 21 EMA quite nicely. A nice volume coming in on this Thursday. Looks pretty good. PII continues to act very well after this breakout. A nice move up. And if you go to a weekly chart, this looks very, very great. Great continuation after this breakout. Moving on, we've got TDC, which moved up but now has pulled back to the 21 EMA. Twitter, we already talked about, nice kind of consolidation action. Lyft looks very, very good. 3-bar break on this past Friday. Sam doesn't look great. I don't like the look of these two bars with kind of bad closing ranges here. And overall, it is pulling back below this base pivot. LLY had a pretty good week. Overall, it moved up, then pulled back gently to the 21 EMA. Nice upside reversal and bullish outside day on this Friday. Vail still consolidating here. Zebra looks pretty good and kind of consolidating like Twitter against the 21 EMA, although the 10-day is in a downtrend. And finally, we've got Google, which is still pretty much going sideways. If we go to a weekly chart, you can see it's still consolidating here, and ranges are actually getting a little bit bigger. So overall, it doesn't look too great. But overall, we did have some nice performances. DKNG, Airbnb. If I can find a way into these stocks, I definitely will try to. And overall, we'll see how these act next week. So moving on, let's talk about sentiment. And we already covered the surveys from this past week, but you can see that this week we had a big jump in bullishness up to 63.2% bullish. So even though that is a dramatic jump, I'm not terribly worried because we are just emerging from a recent correction. Moving on, we've got the name exposure index, and overall, this is down to 48.62. That's a good sign. That indicates that they're a little bit bearish, which is kind of a contrarian indicator and could be a good sign. Moving on, we've got the bulls versus bears poll, and once again, this is pulling back, which is a good sign. And if we take a look at the put-call ratio, you can see that this is back down here, which isn't the best sign here, but overall, the other indicators do indicate that kind of fear is coming back into the market, at least somewhat. And moving on to the IBD Big Picture article, the headline is Stock Market Ends Week with a Bullish Session. Boeing leads Dow Jones as former leaders struggle. And they discuss how the Nasdaq is still technically in a correction until it makes a fall through day, but the stock market returns to a confirmed uptrend due to the continued strength from the other major indexes. And overall, to discuss kind of the struggling signs in DocuSign, Peloton, and Zoom. So those are kind of breaking down a little bit and not really confirming with this rally. They do discuss how Twitter is potentially actionable. So they've kind of spotted the same things that I'm looking at and reading through to discuss Boeing and Goldman Sachs, which are doing quite well. Boeing's chart is very strong. If we take a look at the chart, it broke out of this nice cup shape here on this Wednesday on large volume, and then confirmed on Thursday and also Friday with a great closing range. So overall, that's pretty much it. They talk about how the IBD 50 holds up. Dropbox also had a very strong breakout here, although it is facing a lot of overhead supply. And overall, their take is a confirmed uptrend at this point, but we've kept those distribution days because the Nasdaq is still in a correction. So overall, moving on to the GMI Signal, we are currently green since March 10th, and we've got a GMI score of 4 out of 6 on this Thursday. So overall, taking everything into account, my current view is a confirmed uptrend like IBD, although we still are in a correction on the Nasdaq, and I do want to see that retake the 50-day and 10-week. At this point, I am looking to increase exposure and either add to my existing positions or look to buy new opportunities that present good low-risk entries. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you are new. I'll see you guys in future videos.